Welcome into another Purple Insider Extra. Jonathan Harrison here once again, joined by Purple Insiders Matthew Coller. And Coller, with the Vikings winning the NFC North this season, it means they get a first place schedule next year, meaning they'll host the rest of the NFC division winners, Eagles, 49ers, Buccaneers, on top of the AFC West and NFC South teams, plus Cincinnati. So if you aren't tracking at home, they'll face every single team that was in the conference finals this past weekend. Should the Vikings' brutal 2023 schedule influence their offseason decisions this season?
Yeah, I definitely think that it should. I mean, when you look at the teams that went to the championship weekend, you also have to say how much of this is sustainable for those teams. And the answer is probably a lot. I mean, Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes are going absolutely nowhere, and those are incredibly difficult matchups. And then on San Francisco's side, they have some decisions to make with their quarterback situation, whether they're going to bring back Brock Purdy and trade Trey Lance, or have Trey Lance become the starting quarterback, or get Tom Brady, I guess, is also a potential factor. And then with the Philadelphia Eagles as well, I mean, look at that roster. Jalen Hurts is not going anywhere. These aren't teams that went all in on this year and then could potentially collapse. All the talented players from these groups of teams are going to be back next year. And not only that, but the NFC North is primed to be more difficult. Even if Green Bay does not have Aaron Rodgers next year, it's hard to say what Jordan Love is going to look like, but the other two teams in the division are just going to be better. The Detroit Lions are on the upswing, looking at the way that they played in the second half of the season, and maybe they would have given San Francisco a better run even in the playoffs, because they were one of the hottest teams in the NFC and just barely missed the postseason after starting 1-6. So that kind of tells you where that Detroit team is that's been building for a few years. And Chicago may look like a complete atrocity at this point, but they also have the most cap space in the entire NFL. And if you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, what they did around Trevor Lawrence, they went into free agency, they overpaid a bunch of people, they got criticized a lot for it, and then made the playoffs and were 7 points away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I'm not saying that the Chicago Bears are going to be a 10-7 type team or even better than that, but they could be similar to what we saw from Detroit this year, and that's just going to be harder for the Minnesota Vikings. So the landscape that they're facing, along with all the decisions that they have to deal with this offseason, should influence what they're going to do. If they think that they're going to rebuild an entire defense with a handful of free agents that are on the cheap and run it all back and then hope and pray that a couple of draft picks from last year are going to make the difference, I think that they're probably living in a bit of a fantasy land. They have to look at how much the schedule from last year, 2022, influenced them winning 13 games and how much more difficult it's going to be. That doesn't mean that they have to roll up the tents and not even show up for those games against those teams. All it means is that when things get harder, there's not every season is not the same when it comes to how difficult your schedule is and the luck factor and those things that we talked about throughout this year. So they may have to take a little bit of a longer term approach, knowing that things are going to be tougher for next year than they were for this year.
That's been another Purple Insider Extra for Bring Me the Sports. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the Purple Insider Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you next time.